Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Global Sapphire's Coffee Talk. Accelerate incident response time, safeguard your cloud environment. I'm Yoko Sinlao, your host for today. Thank you for spending your morning with us. We hope that you are all safe and healthy while we wait for the vaccines to arrive. Let us continue to observe proper health protocols as we have an increasing number of cases. We need to act together to curb the spread of the virus. Just a few reminders. There will be a feedback form that will be shown later on, where participants who will accomplish the form will receive a giveaway after the event. Also, we would also be asking everyone to join our photo op before the session ends. All right, before we begin our presentation and discussion, allow me to introduce first the executives from Global Sapphire Philippines Inc., who's our partner host for today. The President and Chief Executive Officer, Ms. Ann Palad, Mr. Edward De La Cruz, their Vice President for Professional Services, and Mr. Victor Mangulabnan, their Chief Operating Officer. In partnership with VST ECS Fields Inc., we have the General Manager for Network and Technology 2, Mr. Leo Valiente, and of course, from our principal, Mr. Tom Acera, Country Manager of FireEye Philippines Corporation, and their Channel Manager, Mr. M. Ilian. Again, good morning, everyone. Now, please join me to welcome the gorgeous Ms. Ann Palad to give us an opening remark. Ms. Ann?
Thank you, Yoko. Good morning, our dear customers. On behalf of Global Sapphire, our partners FireEye and VST ECS, we would like to thank everyone for choosing to spend your morning with us. I see familiar names. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. It's always a pleasure to have you in our events. I also see new names. Thank you for joining us. Well, coffee and pastries are on us this morning. This is as much as we can do in view of our face-to-face events. So I hope you are enjoying your coffee and sandwiches from the Grab vouchers we sent, in as much as we're enjoying ours. So for today, we hope to give you a sensible morning by sharing with you something very valuable to the FSI industry and to you who play very important roles in your own respective organizations. FSI is one of the most vulnerable industries primarily because it involves one of the most sensitive data, confidential personal information. And in a working environment where we are embracing the cloud, it is imperative that you know how to secure what belongs only to you, your customers' confidential data. So the question is, how do you know if your cloud applications are secure enough? How do you properly secure your multi-cloud environment? Imagine if you're able to have that security and that visibility over your cloud environment, which gives you that comfort level, thereby enabling you to present or to prevent and respond to possible cybersecurity attacks, at the same time ensuring that you have the compliance and governance needs of your organization. Most importantly, we have to ask ourselves, do we have the capability to respond to incidents such as breaches and attacks? How timely and efficient can we do that? Today, we will share exactly that. Think of an insurance, that guarantee that you can respond given terms and conditions when cyber attacks come to play. Think of it as a safeguard, as your defense, that readiness to respond when these things happen. Definitely, we cannot undermine the persistence of the hackers, so we have to be ready. I know you're all excited, so let's hear it from the experts. See you at the session. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Ann, for that wonderful message. All right, we'll be moving on to our presentation proper. Please feel free to send in your questions via chat box, and we will try to address all of them after the presentations of our speakers. Our first speaker, she will be discussing about how FireEye Cloudvisory does help an organization with their multi-cloud environment. May I call on Ms. Agatha Larilia, one of the senior systems engineer from FireEye. Agatha, please take it away.
Thanks, Yoko. Good morning, everyone. Again, thank you for joining our session today. So I'll be talking about and sharing with you what we encounter as challenges to the multi-cloud, whether you're using AWS, Azure, or Google Cloud, and also some recommendations on how to execute effective cloud security strategy. So I have a few slides. I'll be talking about, of course, introducing FireEye Mandiant overview, and then I'll be talking about the threat landscape when we talk about cloud, and then, of course, some strategies on how to implement cloud security, focusing on, of course, FireEye Cloudvisory. And then I'll be wrapping up and sharing with you some freebies that you can try out at the end of the session. So FireEye is a US based intelligence led cybersecurity company. So our identity is really focused on threat intelligence, and threat intelligence comes from different sources in FireEye. But I think the most well known source is incident response. So if you Google who FireEye is, you will see that incident response is our bread and butter. We are actually the leader in the incident response market. And incident response basically is when an organization is breached, they will call on FireEye Mandiant to assist them into investigating the compromise, figure out how the attackers went in, and provide remediation recommendations in order to kick out the threat actor. And I've shown here at the bottom of the slides some notable breaches in the past decade where FireEye was helping the organizations respond to that breach. And that's essentially what FireEye is known for. So if you Google who FireEye is, you'll definitely see some news articles where high-profile breaches, FireEye is referenced as the IR provider. So in FireEye, we operate as one company with two brands. We have the Mandiant Solutions, where we offer services and threat intelligence. And then we have the FireEye products, where we offer the best of breed in terms of detection and protection. So this is essentially an overview of our products and offerings. So at the left-hand side, we have the Mandiant brand, which is our vendor-agnostic brand. So this is where we have the incident response services, compromise assessment, red teaming exercises, even tabletop exercises. We also provide a threat intel subscription. Later, I'll be sharing how you can get free access to our threat intel portal. We also have managed defense, which is our advanced SOC monitoring service, or our managed detection and response service. We also have security validation, which helps measure the efficacy of your cybersecurity program. And then on the right-hand side, we have the FireEye Security Controls brand. At the center, we have Helix, which is our SOC platform. So if you're interested in building your SOC, this is a perfect tool for your analysts. All our detection tools are reporting to the SOC platform. We have the endpoint security, network security, and email security. And of course, our topic today, which is Cloudvisory, which is the cloud workload protection platform. So moving on to cloud adoption trends, cloud adoption has grown significantly in the past years. More and more organizations are migrating to the cloud due to a number of reasons. It could be cost, reliability, scalability, and even security. I remember a couple of months back, I saw this post on LinkedIn, and it's like a joke, a meme, if you will. So there's a multiple choice question, and the question is, which was the forefront driver for digital transformation? And the choices are CEO, CIO, CSO, CFO, and then the last choice is COVID-19. And well, COVID is definitely a serious matter, but it's also interesting to see that it was a main driver for organizations to migrate to the cloud or to have digital transformation in the past year. And in many ways, we see that cloud is definitely more secure than the traditional data center. Asset management, inventory, audit logging, two-factor, redundancy, all of these are built into the cloud provider platform already, whether you're using Amazon, Azure, or Google Cloud. Servers are definitely easier to patch and implement in the cloud. Together with cloud adoption and migration, there is a growing number and there is a growing and popular trend of going multi-cloud. It gives organizations a lot of benefits like different features, pricing advantages, uh, flexibility. However, this also adds to the cloud security problem. How do I secure my cloud infrastructure? And how do I address multi-cloud security? What are the different challenges when it comes to multi-cloud? Cloud is definitely more secure. I think we can all agree. They're definitely more secure than the traditional data centers. But assets on the public cloud are still being compromised. So assets on the public cloud are still being compromised, just as those stored in traditional data centers. Mandiant Consulting is a leader in the incident response services. We estimate that almost a quarter of our incident response engagements actually involve public cloud assets or public cloud compromises. So it begs the question, if the cloud is more secure, why is it still getting hacked? So the public cloud addresses many historical pain points when it comes to security operations, but it also introduces new ones that require security practitioners to adapt. In addition to meeting previous security challenges like out-of-date software, patching, proper authorization policies, firewall configuration, etc., the public cloud adds the additional tasks of tracking volatile assets, managing decentralized accounts, or what we call shadow IT, protecting data stored using cloud provider platform services instead of servers, and of course, verifying that all activity in the platform are tracked and authorized. And those are just some of the challenges, and those are also in line with the observations of FireEye in the front lines. So now let's take a look of what our observations are. So definitely we are seeing challenges in visibility where organizations need to leverage multiple disjointed manual methods of discovering cloud assets, and also encountering the challenges of traditional data center strategies that are not applicable to cloud environments. We also see challenges in compliance. Misconfiguration of cloud security controls is still the leading cause of risks and breaches in the cloud. We see multiple sources like Gartner saying that 95% of breaches in the cloud will be due to the customer's misconfigurations. And then, of course, governance. We are seeing organizations unable to quickly correct misconfigurations whenever we identify an incident, and lack of guardrails to prevent them from happening again. So many public cloud compromises actually occur without any cloud hacking at all. So if you look at the headlines that you see here, you see they carefully worded the headlines using terms such as exposed or leaked. So as we see here, 24 million credit and mortgage records exposed on Elasticsearch databases. So exposed meaning there wasn't any direct compromise in the environment at all or in the infrastructure at all. Instead, the organization was unable to protect their cloud infrastructure, their public cloud infrastructure. And there are different ways on how attackers are getting into the cloud. Aside from misusing those very lax controls, they still use, of course, phishing, client-side exploits, or victim misconfigurations, sometimes all three, in order to leverage and cause losses. And these are just some examples of a very popular AWS service, which is the S3 bucket. It's one of the AWS storage services. So there's a third-party firm that did a study, a research firm, they found out that 7% of all S3 buckets have unrestricted public access in AWS, and 35% are also left unencrypted. And they even developed an open source tool that will allow you to search for open Amazon S3 buckets and their content. So if you're currently using AWS, you have an S3 bucket. If those S3 buckets are unrestricted and unencrypted, you can actually search, anyone can search their contents using this tool. And on the screenshot that you see on the right side, these are just some examples of unintended data loss due to unsecured S3 buckets. So you see here, medical records and patient doctor recordings were exposed because the storage solution where it was stored was left open to the public. And those are just some examples. I remember, I think a couple of years back, there was a Southeast Asia country, I forgot which one, definitely not Philippines, where they left their S3 bucket unsecured. And the S3 bucket actually contained voter information, or I think it was their national ID system. And essentially, it means that the attackers now have downloaded the whole population identity. And that's quite scary, definitely. So make sure to secure and encrypt your SD buckets. Another popular tool, open source tool actually that is publicly in the cloud is Elasticsearch and Kibana. So Kibana instances or Kibana is actually an open source free tool that can help you visualize your Elasticsearch data and navigate the Elastic stack. Some of them are left exposed and unprotected, which may lead to data loss or data leaks. And again, similar to the S3 bucket situation with AWS, there are thousands upon thousands of Kibana instances exposed and unprotected. And we have Shodan actually able to search in these Kibana instances. So we now have a good understanding on what are the challenges when it comes to public cloud providers, especially if you're using multi-cloud. Now, what do we need to do to have an effective approach in multi-cloud security? So what are the required capabilities? So cloud environments are dynamic by nature. They're volatile. Today, you might have 100 S3 buckets or VMs. Tomorrow, you'll have 150. The day after that, you'll have 130. It's always changing. That's the nature of cloud environments. Cloud users can create the resources that they need when they need them, and they also allow to be created, altered, or destroyed at any time. And it's actually it's a great tool for DevOps, for developers, especially if you can just spin up an instance that you need when you need it. However, it's kind of a nightmare for the security team because it's definitely hard to monitor your environment if it's always changing. And if you can't visualize or if you don't have visibility into your changing environment, you'll definitely have a hard time securing that cloud environment. So organizations now require continuous discovery of cloud assets, continuous detection and compliance, and of course, a way to enforce guardrails in order to secure their cloud workloads. So that's what I'll be discussing today after that very long intro. So how do we address the multi-cloud security challenges? Number one, it all starts with visibility. So everything depends on visibility, the essential foundation for any cloud security strategy. It doesn't matter whether your cloud security strategy revolves around compliance assurance, threat hunting, governance, or risk, but visibility presents a hurdle which many organizations never clear. So every year, there are surveys of cybersecurity professionals, and the feedback is that visibility is their number one cybersecurity challenge. So before tackling compliance and governance, we definitely need to address the visibility gap. So once you have a clear picture of what your cloud environment looks like, now this gives you the capability to monitor it for changes like new cloud assets. And now you can establish and proceed to address compliance. So compliance assurance means establishing proof of due diligence, which provides the organization with some form of protection from liability, legal or otherwise. So even if an organization cannot stop all advanced threats with compliance checks alone, it can expect to filter out much of the noise by using recurring compliance checks to continuously validate that many basic things are always done right. So once you have an idea on what your compliance checks are, you can measure it, measure your risk, And then now you can proceed with the governance part of the multi-cloud security. So since you know what your gaps are, you can now form a plan or execute how to remediate those risks, or how to fix and improve your cybersecurity posture. You can also implement guardrails using the governance module. And through these guardrails, you can now prevent misconfigurations. So that's essentially the main role of the governance solution. So the Cloudvisory solution, the FireEye Cloudvisory solution, provides the best coverage for all your multi-cloud, multi-operating system environments. So the core modules in Cloudvisory definitely revolves around visibility, compliance, and governance. So it's engineered so that all these three modules will work better together. And that's what I will be showing you in the next couple of slides. It will be screenshots of the different modules in Cloudvisory, focusing on visibility, compliance, and governance. So with visibility into cloud workloads, with a few clicks, you'll be able to query Cloudvisory to show you how many VMs you have that are up and running, how many S3 buckets you have. And aside from having an inventory, an asset inventory, Cloudvisory will also display and show you metadata in order for you to understand the context behind that particular asset. So it's one thing to have a list of your assets, and it's also another thing to understand what those assets are. And that's what is important when it comes to cloud assets. So in this particular screenshot, this is from the infrastructure inspector. We have the asset name displayed, what type of asset it is, what is the provider type, the account it's associated with. So very useful if you have multiple AWS accounts. You don't have to log in separately into your AWS in order to get a view of your VMs. You can do it all in the Cloudvisory platform in a single pane of glass. So even which region that particular VM is installed in, which VPC and when it was discovered, and of course the status, if it was up, if it's active or inactive. And then of course it will show you, there are actually a couple of tabs. It will show you compliance checks, recent compliance checks that were run against this VM. Of course, configuration, which is the metadata coming from the cloud provider. So it will show you the security groups applied to it, IP address, network interfaces attached to that particular VM. Even tags related to that VM will be shown. So for example, who is the owner of that tab, of that VM, So for example, if you're troubleshooting a compliance failure, you saw that that this particular VM is open to in the internet, their security group is incorrect. You know which owner you have to tap into, or you have to contact in order to fix that particular compliance failure. So it's all available in a single dashboard. Aside from cloud assets, it also provides visibility into the net flows and how your VMs, your VPCs in regards to AWS, how they're all interacting with each other. So here we see net flows are represented by the lines, and the direction, of course, represented by the arrows. So we support, of course, the biggest cloud providers like Amazon, Azure, and Google Cloud. So right now in my screenshot, I'm showing you what it looks like for Amazon. So you see the AWS ring outside, and then you have the account, and then you have the region, US-East-1, and then you have the specific VPCs with all the VMs inside that VPC. So very easy to troubleshoot if you need to investigate something. Let's say you're seeing abnormal or maybe suspicious network activity in a particular VM. You can actually dive into that VM and click the view flow details, and it will show you all the transactions for that particular node or for that particular VM. So in this particular example, I'm seeing all the transactions going into my Nix node VM, and it shows me, of course, the direction, the date, the port, the protocol, and what is the status, if it's allowed, blocked. And I even get alerts if the IP address interacting with my VM is currently known as a bad IP, or was previously attached to a suspicious or behavior, or maybe an advanced persistent threat group. So I can filter as well to see all the threats. I can easily export this into a CSV file and hand that over to my analysts to do further investigation, and maybe investigate why was this allowed. It should be blocked. Maybe I need to configure my security controls. So all of these information are available in a single platform. So that's visibility. And then we also have the compliance module, wherein you can see compliance checks. So in this particular screenshot, the compliance check is Azure VM exposed to the internet. So the Azure VM is currently attached to a security group that allows public access. So if that's not intended, of course, you need to remediate that in order to lower your risk. And again, this is tagged as a critical compliance failure. So the Cloudvisory platform provides you with the recommendations on how to remediate. You can do this manually in Azure. Just follow the steps provided in Cloudvisory, or you can actually remediate it from the Cloudvisory platform itself. And it will interact with Azure via API in order to enforce the remediation. So all of those can be done here in Cloudvisory platform. There are also exception handling, because, for example, if you notify the user who owns this VM and you say, hey, you violated a compliance check, VMs are not supposed to be exposed to the internet, and then the owner will say to you, Agatha, yes, it should be exposed to the internet because this VM hosts our public website. So if that's the case, you can actually configure exception. So that's part of the exception configuration in order for this compliance check to not run for this particular VM. So of course, not all compliance checks will be applicable to all types of VMs. And of course, we can't talk about compliance without mentioning reports. Yes, you can definitely extract or generate reports based on compliance frameworks. Like in this particular example, we have S3 bucket fitness, PCI DSS, NIST, HIPAA, GDPR, etc. We also have, these are just some of the built-in compliance reports. You can also create or customize your own reports if needed. For the governance module, of course, it's one thing to have a compliance check, and it's another thing to have the capability to auto-remediate those compliance failures. Now, we can't really auto-remediate all compliance failures, but some of them we can. For example, making sure all your S3 buckets are encrypted. So it doesn't matter who owns the S3 bucket, whether it's publicly accessible or only internal, all S3 buckets should always be encrypted. And we have this auto-remediate option where you can turn it on, and every time an S3 bucket is spinned up in AWS, Cloudvisory will interact via API and enforce turn-on encryption for that S3 bucket. That's essentially what the governance auto-remediation module does. Aside from enforcing guardrails, we also have a microsegmentation feature in the governance module. So since we collect the net flows, as you saw in the visibility module, Cloudvisory applies machine learning into those net flows and recommend to you a least privileged security group that you can attach to that particular VM. And through this machine learning, you can now implement microsegmentation based on least privilege. And I think this is the common buzzwords as well in cloud, wherein we the best practice is to implement microsegmentation. And you can do this in a single platform. Whether you're using multi-cloud, Azure, AWS, you don't need to log in individually in order to implement microsegmentation. You can all do it in the Cloudvisory platform. So as a wrap up, the strategy for an effective cloud security, multi-cloud security, is focused on visibility, compliance, and governance. All of those modules are available in the FireEye Cloudvisory dashboard. And if you're interested to having a live demo, I can do a live demo for specific customers. Just let us know and we'll arrange it for you. I know the screenshots are boring. It's much more exciting to have a live demo. We definitely have that. Let's schedule it if you want a more intimate discussion on Cloudvisory. Now for the most exciting part, the freebies. You can have a free trial for Cloudvisory. We offer a 30-day free trial. It's available in AWS Marketplace. If you have access to AWS, you can just simply download this. It's available there. There's no, I believe there's no approval or anything like that. But if you need assistance on implementation, feel free to reach out to GSI and VST, and we'll help you set up your 30-day trial. We also have Mandiant Advantage, which is our our Mandiant SaaS platform. Part of it is the threat intelligence. And as I mentioned earlier, FireEye is the leader in incident response. Anything we learn on the front lines, we publish that intel in this portal. So if you want to have access to that, we have different subscriptions. The paid versions are SecOps and Fusion, but we also have a free access, where you will have access to the global dashboard, public intel, especially if you're following, for example, the SolarWinds hack. We published all the IOCs there, all the intel information for free, so you can download it there. You'll also have access to actor malware and vulnerability info, open source intel with Mandiant scoring, and even news analysis. So if you're also interested into having a demo on how to use the threat intel, just reach out to us and we'll provide the demo for you as well. By the way, you can find this in FireEye website. As you can see at the bottom of the screen, that's the URL. So you can also use this QR code. So the QR code, when you scan this, it will automatically create an email, and you can send that over to our Mandiant Advantage team for us to trigger your registration. So I'll leave this open. You can take a screenshot or maybe scan the QR code for the next couple of seconds. This is actually my last slide. Again, thank you very much for attending our session. We have the next speaker talking about Mandiant Services, and then we'll also have the Q&A session after that. So yeah, thank you very much, and hope to hear good questions later.
Thank you, Pete, for a very insightful presentation showing how valuable it is to have FireEye Cloudvisory. Again, for the participants, should you have any questions pertaining to Agatha's presentation, kindly park or send them in through our chat box. To continue our session and to introduce our last but not the least speaker, he will be sharing how an organization can be prepared and be able to respond into cybersecurity situations through Mandiant Services. He is a consultant manager from Mandiant Consulting Services, ASEAN, Mr. Vincent Lim. Vincent, the floor is now yours.
All right. First of all, I want to say thank you to my beloved partners, GSI and also VST, for organizing this session. And so I would be very helpful thanks as well to our FireEye customers or customers to join this session. My name is Vincent Lim, like what being introduced earlier. I'm the regional manager managing the ASEAN regions, managing the services being delivered in this region as well. I guess before I start to talk a bit about Mandiant, I would just recap what my colleague has shared earlier. Mandiant as a branding, as a consulting practice as well, we are vendor agnostic in a sense. So sometimes people might thought, what is the difference between Mandiant and FireEye? But actually we are one company. The reason being why we still use a Mandiant branding is really because to signify the security control agnostic brand within the Mandiant. Of course, in Mandiant, we have many different services. Me, myself, are from the consulting arm. All right, so I'm going to talk a little bit more about Mandiant Consulting Services and how this brand come across. Mandiant, we are being trusted by organizations worldwide, over 70% of Fortune 100 companies. And this Mandiant brand actually was acquired by FireEye back in 2013. And since then, Mandiant is part of the FireEye since 2013. But Mandiant itself as a brand, it was founded 17 years ago, focusing on responding and remediating headline breaches. And of course, the moment when FireEye acquired Mandiant, we incorporate or combine our knowledge together and continue to support our clients on the front line when it comes to very sophisticated incident response or even a very light one. So when I mention sophisticated incident response, for example, APT state sponsor or very stage approach kind of threat actors, stage 1, 2, 3. There are a lot of threat actors these days when they do a lot of compromise. They have a stage approach. Stage 1 basically to gain the access. Then after that, they will deploy the ransomware. Of course, the last will be to enable the encrypt functions so that they will encrypt the key critical servers in the client's environment. And we as Mandiant has been dealing with this, and that's our day-to-day job. So I have 24/7 hotlines and also IR consultants on standby to support any clients that have such needs regarding on incident response. And gradually, because we have done so many IRs surrounding the world, we have been asked to do a bit of assessment, to help clients improve, especially on cyber defense, help them to enhance and also transform the cyber defense or the blue team function. Underlying all our services, I think our colleagues cover that quite well when it comes to threat intelligence, and that's what we use in every engagement, regardless if it's an assessment, regardless if it's an incident response or even a transformation work. We always leveraging on our threat intelligence by our own frontline consultants within Mandiant Services. In the past, Mandiant have our own solution. We have something what we call as Mandiant Intelligence Response Tool. That was being decommissioned when we acquired by FireEye. Today, we actually use FireEye products to respond to incident. Of course, there are also non-FireEye clients that actually engage Mandiant. So when they engage Mandiant, they could loan our FireEye technology, or we could go with a strict approach. Either way, we can support them well. But of course, if it's a large-scale incident, for example, we are looking at do analysis on few thousand devices. That's when we always recommend FireEye technology. But it's an optional, and it's always a conversation to have with clients as well. Globally, we have over 400 plus consultants in over 20 plus countries. Most of us are working from home, and even before COVID-19. So before COVID-19, we were working from home. During COVID-19, we are working from home, and after COVID-19, we will continue to work from home as well, because we believe that's the fastest to respond to incident if the client has such needs, especially during today's threat. Due to COVID-19, a lot of borders are closed. There's a lot more immigration requirements as well to cross the country borders. So, our model suit that very well, because we've been doing that for many, many years to work remotely to support our clients to deal with frontline attackers. And I always make this joke with clients as well. If attackers can attack you remotely, we also can support you remotely. And that's the fastest way to respond to an attack that is launched by an attacker remotely. We are being recognized by the industry, especially when it comes to incident response, threat intelligence, incident readiness response and resiliency, and also threat lifecycle as a whole. And this is what we mentioned earlier, again and again, intelligence-led approach. And we have 4 different intelligence in FireEye Mandiant terms. The first one is Adversary Intel. Basically, it's the intelligence that's gathered by our full-time researchers. There's over 180 of them. That is really full-time looking at different dark web and deep webs to understand what's going on surrounding the world. A second intelligence that we have is really our frontline IR incidents, our Mandiant IR consultants being at the front line to gain the experience on what the attackers are doing at the front line, what TTPs they are using, what changes they made to their TTPs as well, what is the latest approach that attackers are using. And we will sanitize all these TTPs and data into our own database, and our threat intel team will maintain that internally. And for us, the next investigation that we do, we can reutilize some of this TTP understanding to make sure our investigation is more effective. So for example, if today you engage us and we realize APT38 is in your environment, that's when we utilize our knowledge of APT38 within this team intelligence to help us to stay upfront, to stay ahead of the game, to work with you yourself to handle that kind of incidents as well. And of course, we also have machine intelligence. Basically, is our research analysts behind the scene to understand what's going on surrounding the world using our FireEye products and alerts as well. Look at the telemetry of the data and share with the team on what is going on surrounding the world based on the alerts generated by the FireEye appliance. And campaign intelligence is actually from our managed defense 24/7 monitoring. They are also the same. They monitor 24/7 if there's anything going on. If there's a certain campaign happening to a certain geographical location or a certain industry, they will also alert us and let us know what's going on. And during every assessment, during every incident response, during every transformation, we utilize this intelligent knowledge to help our client to stay upfront. Because cybersecurity is always evolving, and we believe this is the best approach from an intelligence. All right, I want to touch a little bit about our CAIR approach. I also want to highlight a different companies, different people might have different idea of compromise assessment, might have different idea of incident response. So I want to introduce this concept first about compromise assessment. When Mandiant first started, we are definitely specialized in IR, but that become a question because IR is most of the time reactive. So how can an organization to stay proactive to understand if they are compromised or not? So that's when we launched the methodology of compromise assessment. Of course, different organizations might have different understanding. I have come across organizations that want to do configuration review as part of the compromise assessment. There's no right or wrong, but in Mandiant methodology, our compromise assessment only come with one objective, which is to tell, are you compromised today? So how we are going to do is we really will discuss with you what happened, why you want to engage us for compromise assessment. Is it because of regulatory requirements, or if there's any concern from yourself, or if there's any abnormal activities that you observe. So that's when we talk about initiate scoping and review the leads from yourself. Then we deploy a FireEye technology or Mandiant technology to the environment and conduct an initiate scan and sweep of the environment. So when I talk about the scan, is really a product features. Our agent, the agent we use from FireEye have a lot of features, but we always keep it to a minimal footprint because we understand not everyone is FireEye clients. So when we deploy the agent, we actually deploy a very meaningful features, the one that we need to use to reduce the footprint to the endpoint itself. And then we will sweep the environment. So this is the question that always raised by a client. What it mean by sweep? Sweep basically, imagine in a physical security world, the security guard sweep the building to see if there's any people hiding in the dark corner or any people that is walking around with a sword or guns. That's what security guard do, right? And this is exactly the concept. The difference is we are not sweeping the building physically, we are sweeping the system itself using our agent to see if there's any backdoors, any hidden things that is in the environment. And based on this analysis result, compromise assessment, we can advise client, are you compromised or are you not compromised currently? And of course, if you are compromised, we recommend to go for IR approach. I also come across clients that, because the environment is so, so compromised, so they might not want to do full IR on all the system. They might just want to do limited IRs on a certain system to understand how the attackers come in. Then they'll rebuild the environment based off that. So there's no right or wrong. Investigation can have a lot of different approach. I also come across on some non-regulated customer. They might not even want to do a lot of forensics. They might just want to do one or two, and then they will rebuild the rest. There's no right or wrong. In the end of the day, it's really what is the business require, what you want, and definitely Mandiant will be there to help to advise you, to work with you from a business angle and also technical angle during the investigation. And of course, after the investigation, a client will need help on the review. So that's when we work with the clients and also your vendor, your SI, and also our partners as well to help to advise you what is the best way to build the environment or to fix the gaps or the loophole that was exploited by the attackers. A lot of time, all this could be a very simple one, like my colleagues mentioned earlier. The internet-facing system have some APIs facing the internet, or even some bots facing the internet that could be exploited by the attackers. So these are the things that we observe during IR, and we provide the recommendation for the clients on hardening it further. So our hardening ideas or recommendations always come from the attackers TTP's angle, come from what we observe surrounding the world, and not just only best practice. Of course, best practice is important, but we believe prioritization should be based on real life scenario and based on something that is of substance to your environment as well. All right, like I mentioned earlier, compromise assessment in Mandiant term is really to tell you the answer, whether is your organization compromised. I've come across different organizations want to bundle in different things. I want to bundle in security posture assessment, configuration review, vulnerability assessment, pen tests, and many more. But in Mandiant term, when we talk about compromise assessment, it's really to tell whether you are compromised currently. Definitely, we can help to do a package bundles and things like that, but we do not call a VA as a compromise assessment. We do not call configuration review as compromise assessment. When we say about compromise assessment, is really to referring to check whether are you currently compromised or you are not compromised. And during the compromise assessment, if we see you are compromised, that's when we will recommend you to go for incident response investigation. And that's when you can leverage our knowledge, because during compromise assessment, we have found the attackers using that particular knowledge to help you to respond quicker, faster, and kick out the attacker as well. And this is how we do compromise assessment. So our FireEye agents that we use have a lot of different features. It has antivirus and many more. During the compromise assessment, we will disable most of it. This is also to reduce the footprint to your system itself. Definitely everyone will have some older systems around. For example, your hardware is a bit older. Maybe you are not using SSD, you're using hard drive. So that's when we want to always propose to disable most of the modules of the FireEye agents in the system. We only use what is needed to discover whether there's an attackers in the system. And as a result, we always want to share with client the purpose of doing compromise assessment is not to do an AV scan. Unless you don't have AV, you want us to do the scan. But if you have the AV, we recommend you to perform the AV yourself. When we deploy the agent, we will disable the AV modules, and we will just focusing to understand, is there any custom malware that is deployed by attackers in your environment? Is there any persistent mechanism? So when I say persistent mechanism, it could be a scheduled job, it could be a task that been written by the attackers that is within in your system, sleeping, waiting to be activated. Is there such thing exists in the environment? And also, is there any active lateral movement in the environment itself? So that's how we do the analysis. We sweep the environment. We see, is there any of this forensic data left behind by the attackers, be it a present one or something that it was planted before this. So that's how we do an analysis based on what we call sweeping methodology. And during the IR, we actually use the same methodology. How we use it during IR, for example, today there's an attackers compromise your environment. And this is a common question by the shareholders, by the stakeholders as well. Now you found one system is compromised. Are there any systems that are compromised by the attackers? Today you found one backdoor in your environment planted by the attackers. Are there any other backdoors planted by the attackers? And that's how we use this sweeping methodology to identify the backdoors in the environment. So when we do IR, yes, we definitely will go with, okay, this system compromised, we should do a forensic analysis, but we don't stop there. We always recommend to sweep the environment to answer the questions before even being asked by the stakeholders in the organization. And that's how we do compromise assessment. And that's how we do incident response as well, from a very holistic angle, using our FireEye agents and also our capabilities as well. So let me highlight again, compromise assessment, we always use FireEye technology to do that. We use FireEye technology to perform compromise assessment. But for incident response, we can do both way. We can use FireEye technology. We can don't use FireEye technology. So it's optional for incident response phase. But for compromise assessment, we always use FireEye technology. And as I mentioned about agents, we also use network sensor as well, because sometimes not all your products, not all the OS, for example, router, switch, firewall, definitely do support agent. And that's when we will deploy network sensor as well to the environment to monitor the movement, the active in and out, the internet egress traffics. So I also have clients always ask me, should we deploy the kind of network sensor in the MPLS zone between the data center and the branch? I would say that is optional. That is really a good to have. I will recommend that. But if budget is a constraint, you should deploy at least the network sensor on the egress and ingress of internet traffics. And how we do the sweeping, we also apply all the intelligence we have to discover that whether is there any attackers in your environment. And that's how we can provide the kind of confirmation to tell you whether you are compromised and you are not compromised. It's really based on our analysis of evidence and if there's any anomalies in your environment from the endpoint angles and also network angles. And if we found anything like that, we'll summarize our findings. We'll let you know if it's an active compromise, if there's an active attackers in the environment. We are not going to wait until the end only tell you that. We'll tell you immediately as soon as we can. Once we have the evidence gathered, we'll let you know. And we'll work with you to understand whether you want to trigger an incident response phase or just want to just complete the compromise assessment and you can carry out the discussion later on. So it's really your call. We always try to understand because we understand budget is not unlimited. That's when we work very closely with yourself to understand your priorities, what you need help with, and provide our advice from a threat standpoint and what is the best to do, what is the second options, what is the third options, and etc. But what we bring out on the table in the end is really to help you understand whether you are compromised currently or if you were compromised. In one of the recent compromise assessment, we managed to help client to identify one of the threat actors that compromised them 10 years ago. So they were very impressed. But of course, I asked the question, why the system is there after 10 years? You know, in IT world, we always like to do that refresh. The system probably get reviewed every 5 years. But of course, they were telling us that system is already there for 10 years. It's about to decommission. But it's good because we managed to tell them who were the attacker back then, 10 years ago. So this is something that we have done, and this is something we can do as well. Of course, it's not very often. Not many companies have 10 years old system around. But if there is, and if that system was compromised and the data is still within the system because it's 10 years old, we definitely can find out during the compromise assessment. So this is really our key differentiator. We identify attacker behavior beyond malware. You know, when you use traditional security products or even the antivirus products, the idea is really to identify the malwares in the system. What is the MD5? What is the file names? But what we do in compromise assessment is beyond that. It's really to identify the attacker behavior, whether any attacker set up a backdoor in the system. If yes, how they set up the backdoor, what they use to set up the backdoors. And we'll review the historical data, the forensic data within the system using our sweeping approach, like I mentioned before. We also will identify any active lateral movement using the endpoint agents and also the network sensors. So that's when we cover both angles. One is really from a historical data, more passive, kind of data, which is a sweeping. And we also cover the active movement using a real-time components within our agents and also the network sensor. And as a result, we are able to identify the identities of compromise. A lot of time when people try to look at securities, they always try to block the MD5, they like to block the file names, but they forgot when the attackers deploy a ransomware, for example, they already have access into the system. Yes, eliminating the ransomware is very important, but to understand how the attackers come in, what ID they are having in the environment is also very important as well. And that's how Mandiant differentiate ourselves from a traditional security products and also other vendors as well. We will help the client to identify the identities, be it which group of the attackers they are, or what IDs they are using to compromise the environment. And why we want to use both network and endpoint technology, like I mentioned, network, not every device support agents. Router, switch, firewall definitely don't support agents. So that's when we always recommend to have the network sensor in place as well for at least the egress and ingress internet traffic. All right, so this is the compromise assessment team structure. We have a group of our own consultants within APJ regions, but when you engage Mandiant, basically you are engaging Mandiant as a whole. If you are signing up for our incident response retainer services, you realize you can call us 24/7 because globally we are supported by APJ region, which I'm in. We also have EMEA region and US region, and we work using a follow the sun model as well. Of course, 24/7 coverage is provided for the incident response. For the compromise assessment, we have a pre-agreed schedule with the clients on what is the scope coverage. So these are some of the scopes. We will talk about what are the devices the client want us to cover, what is the network traffic they want us to cover. We also talk about the schedule as well. If the client today is using our FireEye technology, of course, we might be able to skip the technology deployment phase. But if you are not using FireEye technology and you want to engage us for compromise assessment, it's extremely normal for us as well. We could always work with you to deploy a FireEye technology on a loaner basis, on a rental basis, and we'll only turn on the modules that we need to use, which is very light because we disable most of the modules. We only turn on the modules on a need to use basis. All right. And after we deploy the technology, we will perform an enterprise sweep, which is a data collection phase to see if there's any attackers in the environment. And then after that, we will analyze the sweep data together with the network traffic generated by the network sensors. I also want to highlight our network sensor is always placed not inline mode, it's always on a span mode. So it will not cause you any production impact from a network traffic standpoint. But this is also a conversation we always like to have with client before we start the engagement, because we understand that sometimes the switch might not have enough span ports. Sometimes the switch might already running 80% CPU, so you will not be able to do the span. And that's when we work with our partners, FireEye partners like GSI and so on, to provide an alternative suggestion to yourself, be it to deploy a separate network product or even monitoring. We'll work with you, see what is best for you as a client and for us as a security consulting services to gain the visibility. And then after that, of course, provide you the compromise assessment report, the assurance, not say assurance, but the report that tell you whether you are compromised currently or not. All right. So the engagement timeline is about 4 to 8 weeks post technology deployment. Why we always say post technology deployment, because that one is really depending on your change management process. I know clients that have a very quick change management process, so the deployment might only take 1 week or 2 weeks. But I also come across clients that have more lengthy process, more testing process. So that's when deployment of agent might take longer than 1 to 2 weeks. All right. And during the engagement, if we observe any evidence of compromise, that's when we'll reach out to you as soon as we can to discuss with you on incident response and investigation, all right, as a separate contract. During the compromise assessment, we will also provide you a weekly regular status report for enterprise sweep and also network traffic analysis. We do not provide updates on the technology deployment. The reason being is because that it will be handled by our our beloved partners, GSI, to work with you closely to deploy the agents. And of course, at the end of analysis, we also provide you a compromise assessment report. We can also provide an executive briefing to your C-levels or even your board members as well. A deck that is focusing on executive, that is a bit more layman terms as well. Our report is extremely tactical, but of course, it also comes with an executive summary. But we understand sometimes the business stakeholders might want something more layman term. So that's when we offer a separate deliverables called executive briefing, which is more laymanized than the tactical report. All right. Also, we touch a bit on technology that we use. So we use FireEye HX. That's the agents I mentioned multiple times. This FireEye HX can be on-prem, can be on the cloud as well. So depending on your preference. So it can be on-prem as a virtual appliance. It can be also on the cloud. We host it in AWS as well. So it's an option the client can go for, whether you want it on-prem, whether you want it on cloud. So if it's on cloud, FireEye can spin it up. If it's on-prem, if you need any assistance to deploy the virtual appliance, that's when our sales engineer Agatha and also our partners GSI will be involved to help you to deploy the virtual appliance as well. And then after that, of course, to work with you to deploy the agents in the environment. These are some of the operating system, the agent support. So you will see Windows 2000 is not here. So if you have that kind of system, we still have older agents. What I mentioned earlier, the Mandiant Intelligence Response Tool might be able to support that. But I want to highlight that agents are no longer supported by anyone. It was a legacy tools that was supporting Windows 2000 and so on. So we have come across clients that want us to perform compromise assessment on Windows 2000. So that's when we bring up the tools. But we also be upfront with clients, right? That tool has been there for years, and Windows 2000, is no longer supported by principal as well. So if anything goes wrong, it's really a risk. We always tell clients you might just want to consider to upgrade the OS before you perform the compromise assessment. However, this is some of the conversation we always have with client. All right. It also supports Mac OS and Linux OS as well. And this is a network sensor I mentioned before. So you see what we mentioned here is definitely is an appliance, it's an on-prem appliance. We are not going to forward your PCAP data to internet or things like that. We are going to ship a physical appliance that it can place in your on-prem to monitor the ingress and egress traffics. Of course, the MPLS is an optional. So depending on what you want to cover, depending on how you write the papers as well to your board or your management, we can provide the recommendation accordingly. All right. The second one, I want to talk about incident response retainer. Like I mentioned earlier, during CA phase, if we found anything, we recommend client to go for incident response. But of course, during peaceful time. So today, if there's something happened to your environment, the question is who you are going to call. Are you going to shortlist vendor when you got issue, or you want to shortlist vendor beforehand? And that's when incident response retainer come in. So incident response retainer is really there to help you. During crisis, you already know who to call. You already know the process. You already know the rules of engagement. And that will help you to save the precious time when it matters the most. The last thing your management will want to hear, something has gone wrong, and now you only start to shortlist vendor. That will raise a lot more alarms and questions. So that's when we always recommend client go for incident response retainer option. So when something happens, you already have the terms and conditions agreed by your legal and also FireEye legal as a whole. And also you already know who to call when something happens. A lot of time it's not about whether incident will happen in your environment. The question is always when it will happen. And when it happens, you might want to find out how it happened. And that's when you have capable resources internally. But that's when also you might need a trusted partner to work with you to investigate what exactly happened. And of course, if we have a pre-agreed terms and condition, that's when we can proactively decrease the response time. You do not need to go through the legal process. You already understand the rate cuts. You already understand how we are going to charge on an hourly basis from GSI. And that's when things will be faster for yourself. And that's when you can reduce the business impact and also cost of a breach. Imagine attackers already in your environment and you still need to spend time to talk about the legal terms and conditions. The impact will be greater and greater. And you do not want that happen to your environment. You want to make sure you are in control. If something happens, you know who to call. And that will help you to reduce the business impact greatly. And we have a few different kind of incident response retainer. It's a very flexible depending on what you go after. But this will offer the peace of mind. You know, when something happens, you already know who to call and what is the arrangement going to be like. We have two different incident response retainer. The first one is really on a best effort basis. There's no guarantee SLA. Second one is, of course, with a guarantee SLA arrangement as well. The one without SLA guarantee, legally, there's two arrangements. One is what we call $0. You do not need to pay upfront. Another one is what we call prepaid tier 1 that you need to pay upfront. The difference between $0 and prepaid hours simply is really depending on your commercial position of the organization. So today, if you go for $0, you know, if anything, of course, you know who to call. However, you still need to go through the last part, which is the commercial, because without commercial approval, you still cannot engage vendor. So that's the pros and cons of $0. You already know who to call, but you might not have the budget in hand to activate something. But if you go for prepaid hours, you already have the approval, you already know how to do it, who to call, and you already have approval to have already certain hours with you that you can trigger. So you don't need to worry so much on commercial, or you can just trigger first and worry the longer term later on. But at least someone will come to you first because there's already a certain hours you already purchased as part of the tier 1. All right. And I also understand from some of our clients, you know, after they are concerned, you know, after they buy, for example, 80 hours, 100 hours, if they don't utilize it, is it going down to the drain? No. If the client purchased as 80 hours or 100 hours and they didn't use it within 12 months, they can repurpose it to other services. It could be training, it could be assessment, it could be red team. You know, we are very flexible with that. So if you use it within 12 months, of course, touch wood, I don't hope you to use it, but at least you already have an agreement in place. And if you really didn't use it, you can repurpose it to other services. So this is for tier 1. We have two different options: $0, which you do not need to pay upfront, and also prepaid, which you need to pay upfront. For tier 2, guarantee SLA is all prepaid upfront, and it comes with a guarantee SLA. And the benefit of guarantee SLA is really you got the commitment legally from FireEye that we are going to respond to you within 2 hours or 4 hours. And this is really, when you reach out to us, we will provide you the advice and consultation within 2 hours and 4 hours on what you need to do next. And we will have the team assemble within 24 hours the moment you declare you need help from FireEye Mandiant IR response. And that's how we do it. And be whether you go for tier 1 prepaid or tier 2 prepaids, we have a 24/7 hotline for you to reach out to. And we also have a mailbox for you to email if you prefer to contact us that way. And it's also monitored by our consultants 24/7 as well. And these are some of the services I mentioned earlier. So really depending on what are the amounts of services, hours you purchase, you can repurpose to some of these services. I also must highlight, if you purchase 80 hours, you know, definitely not enough for compromise assessment. So you can choose to top up further for a compromise assessment. It's really a conversation on what you prefer to. Some of our clients purchase 80 hours, 100 hours, and after that, they prefer to use the 80 hours on training. And that's fine as well. We have both classroom training and also public training. So public training is go by seats. So FireEye, as a company, we have public training that we host many different courses over the years. And of course, you can find that schedule or calendar on our public website as well. Then that is when you can choose which class you want to go with, and you can use the incident response retainer hours for that as well. All right. And this is how you can reach out to us. Like I mentioned before, a declaration request, you can reach out to us through a 24/7 hotlines and emails. I also have client ask me, Vincent, is it faster to call you or is it faster to call your FireEye local team? There's no difference because the moment you call us, we also need to email to this particular mailbox or we need to call in as well. So for example, if let's say I'm on a plane, of course it's lesser these days during COVID-19, but I still travel for a few countries that I can in and out. But so if you try to call me, I'm not picking up the phone, then you might get a bit frustrated because I'm not picking up the call because it went to voicemail. So that's when we always tell our client, email to the mailbox is monitored by 24/7. Is call that particular phone number is someone will pick up your phone on a 24/7 basis. And that's when after we receive your request from our using email or the phone by a hotline, that's when internally we will find to assign a resource for you to perform the initial assessment, which is the callback from IR consultant. But of course, it's also depending whether you have SLA or no SLA. If you have no SLA, it's on a best effort basis. If you have SLA, of course, we will call you within the 2 hours or 4 hours windows. And after we consult with you, we understand your challenge, your issues, we provide the advice. If it's confirmed, you need to do IR. We provide you the recommendation and you agree you want to perform IR. That's when we have this phase called official declaration. And the moment you agree to have an official declaration that you want to consume hours to perform IR, that's when we'll assign a IR lead. But of course, if you are having the $0 options, of course, there's no hours. So that's when we'll contact GSI or a FireEye account manager to reach out to you on a commercial arrangement. So that's the pros and cons between the $0 and the prepaid one. Okay, there's no right or wrong. If you ask me, there's no right or wrong, but definitely with a prepaid hours, things will be faster. However, that require a upfront commitment. And $0, of course, is better from a commercial terms. You do not need to pay anything, and but of course, it's slower during the incident phase as well. All right. So that's the few different incident response retainer options we have. And these are the incidents that we always look at. So for example, APT matters is our day-to-day investigation, business email compromise, ransomware, data loss, third-party related incident, especially recently, supply chain is a huge topic. We can perform the kind of incident for you. Of course, if it's related to your vendors, third-party vendors, or their environment, that's when we need to clarify with you on the legal stand as well, whether you have the jurisdiction to look at their environment or not. So our legal definitely is familiar with that and can work with you. Be it, crypto-related infrastructure or like my client, like my colleague mentioned earlier, the cloud could be compromised these days, and we can do the kind of investigation. So when it comes to cloud, sometimes, if it's a VM on the cloud, we deploy the agents. If it's not a VM, it's not infrastructure as a services, it's a software as a services or platform as a services. That's when we perform more log analysis. So like I mentioned earlier, when it comes to incident response, it could be, we could use FireEye agents, we could just go with script or log analysis approach, really depending on your circumstances at the time and your requirement as well. Then we'll customize the approach accordingly. All right. Or if there's any data theft, or if there's any campaign going on that is affecting the financial industry, or if there's any suspicious on insider threats, or if there's any data exposure on the dark web and you're just curious how people might steal your data and put in the dark web, so you want someone to investigate, we can also do that as well. I also want to highlight what we don't do. We are not a financial fraud analysis expert, but we are definitely the cyber threat expert when it comes to cyber incidents. All right. This is how the delivery team will be look like. So me and my directors as well that take care of ASEAN region will be your single point of contact when it comes to executive discussion. But when it comes to day-to-day operations, we have an IR lead assigned during the incident response engagement to work with your technical teams when it comes to technical discussion, when it comes to drill down on the forensic data or the evidence. Of course, behind this incident response lead, there's a team of supports. It could be the incident response analyst. It could be our malware reverse engineer. It also could be our intelligence team that is supporting this incident response lead to stay in control and provide you that visibility from a technical sense. And if you need any executive briefing, that's when we will come in as well, work with our technical lead to laymanize the context and also the description to make sure your board and your executive can understand that from a business impact angles as well. All right. And during incident response, if you need any remediation assistance, we also have remediation specialists to provide you advice. For example, they might recommend you to perform a domain functional upgrade of your AD servers. They might provide advice on your AD forest on how you could harden it. They might also give you advice on how you need to harden your M365 or even your cloud infrastructure environment. For example, it could be Azure, it could be AWS, and that's the day-to-day activities by our incident remediation specialists. All right. And if we need to use any tools, that's when our host and network analysis platform is available, and our partners can work with you to set that up. If you are using it as a rental basis, or even if you are buying it, they can certainly work with you closely to set the kind of platform up. And of course, we also have our own intelligence, like I mentioned earlier, when we do compromise assessment or even incident response, that's when we leverage on our intelligence to make sure we are stay ahead or as ahead as we can be from an incident response view. Why you should engage us? Because we are the frontline expert. We are the leaders in incident response, especially the sophisticated one, the state-sponsored grade, and so on. And we have been doing that since 2004 to deal with all these frontline incidents. And we are the leaders when it comes to incident prevention, detection, and also remediation as well. And definitely our technologies, Mandiant as an internal user, we use our own FireEye technology to perform a lot of investigation. And if we see anything we need, and the FireEye technology is not providing, we will always reach out to our team internally to talk about enhancement and also feature upgrade and also feature requests as well. Lastly, I also want to cover our red team as well. I will just put this is our red team attack lifecycle. It's a very straightforward lifecycle. This is what we are going to cover during red team attacks. And how we differentiate ourselves from many different vendors. Our red team is objective-based, and we aim to cover the whole lifecycle from an initial recon all the way to complete missions. So when we say complete mission, which also means we will need to define the objective upfront with you to understand what is your concern. So today you are from a financial sectors, it could be access to the domain, access to your Swift system, access to your ATM system, or even stealing your key executive emails as well. It could be objective, really depending on your needs at the time, what is the concern, or if not, we could propose a few as well. But during our red team, we aim to cover the whole life cycle to make sure you have a holistic pictures. We also have a different approach, especially the first two phases is really social engineering and internet scan. A lot of people might harden the environment using firewall. A lot of people might not even, can receive email easily because they are already using our FireEye ETP or EX. So in that sense, it's already well blocked. So that's when we will decide with client to go with an assume breach approach. Assume breach approach, basically, we will get your user, one of your user or your IT guys to double click the files that we created that we will send to you in an email. Then we will start from there to do an assume breach red team approach. And that's when we also will tell client, these two phase, social engineering and so on, we skip that because you believe you are already well defended. So that's when we will simulate the scenario where if your user click the file, after that, how far we can go, whether we can achieve our objective or not. The question is really, we know a lot of tools are being customized by attacker these days, and a lot of it are bypassing the latest email security mechanism. So the question is really not so much about how many emails you can filter. A lot of time the attackers these days, they just register one email in a public domain and they can send the email to you easily. The question is really if the user click the file, whether the file will be launched. If the file launched, how far the attacker can go in the environment. And that's what we want to bring out during the red team exercise. These are our overall services portfolios that I'm happy to talk to anyone. If you all have any further questions or interest as well, GSI definitely is available to set us up to a one-to-one call if that's what required and if you want to know us more as well. All right, I just want to say thank you and I will hand back the section to the team.
Yeah, thanks for the presentation. By the way, the recorded presentations will be shared afterwards. Now, we're going to open up our session for our participants to raise their questions. May we also request for our speakers, Ms. Agatha and Mr. Vincent, to turn on again their camera, and calling also with Mr. Emilian and Tom Acero from FireEye to facilitate the discussion.
Yeah, hi, good morning to everybody, and welcome to today's Coffee Talk. I'm sure this is the first of many from GSI, right, Ms. Anne? Thank you for spending your morning with us. My name is M. I am the Channel Account Manager of FireEye Philippines. First of all, FireEye would like to thank Ms. Anne and her GSI team for organizing this event. Thank you to our distributor, VSTECS, headed by Leo Valiente and Yoko Sinlao for their facilitation. Of course, everybody has already met Agatha and Vincent. With us is Thomas Hero, our country manager of FireEye Philippines. Also, our enterprise account manager, Miss Emily Armada. I will now give it back to Yoko on the first question.
Yeah, this is Reggie from the Bureau of Treasury. I'd just like to know if Cloudvisory can isolate VMs who are compromised.
Hi, Sir Reggie. Yes, Cloudvisory can isolate compromised VMs or cloud assets. So if you recall my presentation earlier on the governance module, since we can enforce security groups through the Cloudvisory, we can create a type of a quarantine security group and use that to enforce isolation on compromised VMs. So I can show that in a demo if you're interested to see more. Thank you for the question.
What if I don't have any FireEye tech? Can I still avail IR or compromise assessment?
Definitely. I think that's a good question as well. Like I mentioned earlier, for compromise assessment, we do utilize FireEye tech. So of course, if you do not have FireEye tech, that's when we will discuss how to work with you to deploy the FireEye tech, and that's when GSI will come in to work with you closely as well to deploy the FireEye technology. So that's for compromise assessment. For incident response, it's really depending on your scenario. So for example, today the one that got compromised is your cloud environment, and you only want us to investigate the cloud first. So that's when we do not need to use any FireEye tech at the start, because we are just talking about maybe your M365, maybe your Azure environment. But eventually, if you want to look at the device itself, the system or the laptops or the server itself, so that's when we can discuss whether you want to go with a script-based approach, which is slower, or you want to go with an agent approach. So essentially, just to summarize, for compromise assessment, we will need to utilize FireEye tech. If you do not have it, we can go with a renter approach. But for incident response, we could use FireEye tech or not use FireEye tech, depending on your circumstances and also what is your objective of investigation itself.
Thank you for that, Vincent. There's also another question from the chat. Does Cloudvisory detect valid from invalid RDP access to virtual machines?
Yes. So there are a couple of ways on how to do it. If you recall the visibility module from Cloudvisory, we do collect net flows, so we can collect RDP transactions as long as it's showing up in the cloud platform as well. So here you can see the IP address that was used to RDP into the virtual machine, and then you can extract that report and identify which IPs you don't know about. Let's say this IP is not from our organization, so why is it logging in? Why is it using RDP to connect to my VM? And another thing on how to do it is if the IP used to RDP into the VM is a known bad IP, meaning we already know that this is a suspicious IP, malicious IP that was used before in a compromise, then we will alert you. If you remember the screenshot, there were yung red triangles beside the IP address to show that it's a malicious IP. So you can do those a couple of ways in order to identify invalid RDP sessions. Same thing with Azure. So not just AWS, we can also do it for Azure and Google Cloud, as long as you set up the collection of the net flows.
Thank you, Jade, for that response. There's another one. What happens if Mandiant finds an active attacker in my network?
Compromise assessment, if we found any active attackers in the environment, that's when we will discuss with you whether you should trigger the incident response phase or not. We will always reach out to you as soon as we can or as immediately as we can, because this is also depending on different clients might have different objective. Some, they might want a full investigation. Some might just want to trace an attacker's path. I also come across clients that just decide to just review the system as well. As I said, there's no right or wrong. It's really a discussion. If you ask FireEye Mandiant, we always recommend an incident response investigation to understand how attackers come into the environment. And if the client want to know the full story, that's when we recommend a full incident response analysis on all the systems as well.
Thank you, Vincent. There's another question from the chat box. What if someone from the Office 365 users hack the account? As far I can be also detect their security solution.
I like this question very much. Thank you, Ernie, for asking. Kasi it shows you how complicated cloud security is. So the answer here is Cloudvisory will not detect this. Kasi it's already using a legitimate account that is misused by the attacker. It means that our strategy into an effective cloud security should be holistic. The first step definitely is to have visibility, and that is given to us by Cloudvisory. But you also have to look at it from another perspective. So there's one way that you can detect misusing compromised accounts, and that's through FireEye Helix. So it means that it's an interesting question because it really proves that there is no silver bullet into security. You have to have a combination of tools in order to address different threats. So when dealing with compromised accounts, you can still track it using Cloudvisory. You can check yung IP addresses used by the compromised account. However, to fully investigate that, you need a separate tool, and that's FireEye Helix to monitor your Office 365 events. So that's quite an interesting question. And then the second question is, if Cloudvisory, does Cloudvisory support light sale of AWS? I'll have to double check. I'm not familiar with light sale. But maybe if they're still using, if Lightsail uses AWS services like EC2, S3 buckets, etc., we do support it. And then yes, multi-tenancy is available, multi-tenancy management. And then scrubbing server, I'm assuming this is for anti-DDoS. That one is not part of Cloudvisory. I think it's a separate solution kapag anti-DDoS. And then I'll also proceed. Can Cloudvisory work with two different cloud, AWS and Ali Cloud? So yes, Cloudvisory can be used for multi-cloud environment. So if you have AWS, Azure, and Google Cloud, lahat sila you can manage using Cloudvisory. However, we currently do not support Ali Cloud. Yun lang yung challenge sa question. But we do support multi-cloud, how do you call this? Multi-cloud, multi-accounts. If you have multiple accounts, you can all manage them through a single portal. And then can we also add on-prem? On-prem depends on what you're using. We support private cloud platforms like OpenStack and Kubernetes. So yun yung mga supported namin right now. Ayun. So thank you for the questions. Lots of interest in Cloudvisory, so that's good.
Thank you for those questions. Any more questions from our participants?
Good morning.
Yes, sir.
Question po, how does Cloudvisory enforce the remediation policies?
So for Cloudvisory, if there are two ways on how to do it. It could be automated or it could be manual. So for auto remediate, like let's say for example, anytime an S3 bucket is spinned up, we need to enforce guardrails, like it should be always automatically encrypted. So that's one way of doing the auto remediation. The other one is manual. So if there's any compliance failures, you can manually trigger the remediate function in the compliance check. And another way is kung mas manual yung gusto nyo, you can just take the remediation recommendation and apply it using the native cloud provider console. So yun yung iba't ibang ways on how we can enforce remediation.
If there's no any more questions from our participants, we would like to thank you everyone. And for any more questions, please feel free to contact Global Sapphire team. They would always be happy to assist your inquiries. Now we would like to ask the participants to fill out our feedback form by scanning the QR code that is shown on your screens or via link provided in the chat box. Again, there will be a giveaway for every participant who will accomplish this feedback form. Okay, let's have our photo op now. We request everyone to please turn on your camera and to show your sweetest smile with us. Kindly stand by also as our technical team will be capturing our photo. Um, okay, we'll be capturing in 3, 2, 1. Smile, guys. Now, before we officially close, let me call on Mr. Leo Valiente for our closing remarks.
Hi, thank you, Yoko. Well, as we close today's session, we're very happy to see that we've got a lot of our customers who joined us this morning. Thank you for lending your time for us this morning. We see a lot of familiar names and a lot of new ones. So I hope it was a very productive morning as it was for us. Thank you to Agatha and Vincent for your very informative and very engaging discussions and for sharing your thoughts and insights during our open forum. Thank you, Tom M. and the whole FireEye team for lending your expertise for us this morning. And of course, thank you to our partner, Global Sapphire. Thank you, Miss Anne, Red, Vic, and the whole GSI team for giving us the opportunity to share FireEye's solutions and services. And of course, most importantly, thank you to the customers who joined us despite your very busy schedules, I'm sure. We hope it was a very informative session, as it was for us. Hearing from you, from the your questions during the open forum gives us insight on the what are the challenges that you actually see. I think like what Gaith had mentioned. We see a lot of interesting insights from you. As what she mentioned, there's no silver bullet in all of these challenges that we're seeing, and hearing from our experts about the threat landscape and how we can improve our security posture, and how visibility is important in letting us keeping us abreast of all of these threats, and how we can recover from it, learn from it, and prevent it from happening again. It's all very important. And if I can borrow from Miss Ann's words earlier, it's like putting in the necessary safeguards or insurance to protect your environment. And that's where the FireEye team, the FireEye GSI and VST teams would like to help you. If you have any more concerns or any more questions, and if there's anything that we can help you out on, please do not hesitate to contact us. Our partner, Global Sapphire, has a team of has a team of experts that are very equipped to help you on these concerns. So please just let us know, and we'd be very happy to engage you further on this. So again, thank you for your time, and looking forward to working with you as you go through this journey. And have a good day, a great weekend ahead, and always keep safe. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Sir Leo.
Thank you.
We'll be now flashing again the QR code for our feedback form. For those who haven't filled it out yet, please do so, as a giveaway will be given out once this is accomplished. By the way, the recordings of these presentations will be shared later afterwards of this event. Again, thank you for those who have submitted their feedback forms and for joining the session this morning. Please stay safe, and you may also you may leave the session now. Thank you so much. Please stay
Thank you.
safe.
Thank you,
everyone.
everyone.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.